There are times when arm days absolutely make sense. Hey everybody, I thought I would chat with you guys and gals about this today. So again, when we're talking about arm days, this is something when I was much younger, back in my 20s, I used to do, and I actually, quite frankly, had bigger and better arms than I do now in my 40s back then. And it's something because of my strength training background, the powerlifting background, I've been very resistant to the idea because I've always said, look, we can just tack arms on at the end. They can be done last. It's fine. But the thing is, I did that for a decade and it didn't work that well for me. You know, my back and everything grew, chest and everything grew, but my arms didn't grow in proportion. And it's not just genetics, I would say in my case, because I had much bigger arms when I was younger. So it is definitely a training thing to think about. And what I want people to think about there, it comes down to the ability to recruit the highest threshold muscle fibers. And this is one of the big problems when we do too many body parts in one day, or we try to do full body type training when we are finished with our novice phase. I think novices, this is not a problem at all. I don't think it's an issue at all. Their work capacities are just not that high. It's not that hard to get them to grow if they train hard, right? It's just not a big deal. However, if we're doing other exercises before arms, what do we know about, at this point, the data? You're dealing with localized fatigue, and if it's only localized fatigue, it's not that bad. So let's say you are only doing exercises that work your arms first, but they're big movements. Like bench press does work triceps. You see these rows, they do work biceps. It's not going to be as bad if you're doing that. But what if they aren't working them that effectively? The rows are not necessarily the best bicep exercise, and they create a ton of fatigue. And if you have balanced arms, I think this works perfectly fine. Like if you don't have any imbalances and your arms are not lagging, it's still probably okay. The problem becomes when we've done a bunch of other stuff first. And in other words, if we're doing chest, back, and all of that before we're doing arms, what's going to happen? We are creating not just fatigue, the localized fatigue, because again, if we're doing big movements that are training the arm first, it's not really a problem, because we're just continuing the workout there. So like I said, if you did purely a pull workout like a back and biceps, okay, not as big of a deal, because the biceps did get worked all the way through, but you will notice a reduction in performance on them versus if you do arms fresh. Same thing with pressing. Okay, if you're benching and inclining first and then you do triceps, probably not as much lost. And if, again, someone who has no imbalances, if you have a pretty balanced physique, you could do a push-pull legs. Those shoulders wherever you want in there. You could do a push-pull legs. So your chest and triceps would be trained on the one of the day, back and biceps on another. Then you do legs on your other day of the week. And it'll work perfectly well. If you already have an imbalance, or you're genetically predisposed to not the best arms, this may still create a problem. All right? And then you may have to do what I am doing now and doing an arm day. Now, the other thing I'm going to say, I'm just going to be frank, and again, this is an idea I was very resistant to for a decade. But I've come to accept the fact that if a person really has a goal of big arms, that's really the most important body part to them, even if they're not imbalanced, but they want to make sure the arms are very dominant, they still might want to do an arm day. And what I want people to think about with an arm day is what it does in terms of even efficiency in training. Because, if we do a full upper body, we run into that whole fatigue issue. But even if we do the other type of split, it also takes twice as long, really. So what I want people to think about, the ability to do opposing muscle groups kind of really cuts your training time down. And doing supersets for arms, like triceps to biceps or biceps to triceps, we can do twice the arm work in the same half hour or hour in the gym. Okay? Because they don't interfere with each other directly. In fact, if anything, they can help helps maintain a good pump in the arm. It can help create stability in the elbow joint. It can actually be very effective. So we have no negatives from doing that. So even from a training economy time, to do your chest and then triceps, and then a separate day where you do back and then biceps, you look at the training time spent, it will take longer. So for example, like if someone does chest and back, they can do all their stuff in supersets. Okay, those workouts will literally be shorter. The arm day will literally be shorter. You get the same amount of training, less gym time. So it's very efficient to set your splits up to where you can do these opposing muscle groups. And again, we come over to the point of, we start thinking of what's the other perk. Well, if we have an arm day, that is our primary stimulus. But then we talk about muscle protein synthesis through the week. But if we have chest or back on their own day or separate days completely from the arms, what happens? It will probably re-stimulate some of that muscle protein synthesis from the arm day. And I think this is something that we have to look at with splits also, that we have to factor into the equation. We can put in better work and ensure that we're hitting the highest threshold muscle fibers if everything is worked from the start, right? So if your arms have their own day and you're starting with a tricep and a bicep exercise, your very first sets are capable of getting to those deep fibers. There's no other additional fatigue that has fatigued the nervous system to where it may not want to recruit those fibers in your final body parts or exercises that you do. And I think this is a particular problem when we start doing the real high volume stuff where we stack a lot of stuff before arms. And if we do it the other way, then the other muscles will suffer. Like, you don't want to do arms and then do your other movements. The other movements are going to suffer. Your chest and back and shoulders are all going to suffer. So again, we then have imbalanced training the other way. Have them on their own day. They're going to get maximum stimulus. And even if people are like, but is that enough to maintain the muscle protein synthesis? Yeah, because you're going to be doing chest and back separately on different days. Those will probably re-stimulate that. It'll get blood flow to it, get some training response anyways back to those areas. And I think that is something that we do have to consider with these sort of setups. There is going to be an overlap in that regard. Even though those days themselves are going to stimulate less arm growth, they will get them back to moving again. Okay? And they're also not going to create as much fatigue in those arms, so we're not fatigued as much when we get to that arm day again. It's going to be easier for that localized fatigue to dissipate and recover. So yeah, it does make sense. It makes sense, and this is why I'm personally having to do it now again, because I am imbalanced. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.